I always like to start with my personal story because I literally went through the absolute fear of childbirth myself, and then came out the other side. And now I'm a birth educator and teacher of these principles, and sharing this understanding with pregnant ladies for their birth preparation. So it's a real turnaround from absolute, just thinking of a line in my book, from fear to freedom, literally from absolute, crippling fear to freedom. So I hope it will be helpful for people. But just a little bit, I just thought I'd highlight in my story is how, because we do it in life, in everything, and we just don't really notice that we're doing it, which is that we build stories of how we think things are. And we're doing it all the time, and it's invisible to us. So it's almost like I had built this image of what birth was like. And for some reason, I had done it from when I was a very young age. I was always petrified of giving birth. I used to think about it when I was young, like 12 years old for sure. I remember thinking about it, discussing it with my best friend on the swings. I remember it clearly, saying like, how are we going to give birth? It's like, it's torture. I remember having those thoughts about it, and really noticing pregnant women in the street and thinking, how are they going to get that baby out? Why aren't they so scared? Like, how can they just be going about their normal life? This is petrifying. So it was very much, for some reason, highlighted in my thinking. But I suppose there's a great quote, which I'll get wrong, I'm sure, but I know it flies around a lot. It's by the scientist David Bohm, where he says, thought creates our reality and then says, I didn't do it. And that's what I really want to highlight here, is that my thinking totally conjured up this rock solid reality of this is what birth is. Birth is torturous, birth is hard, birth is scary. It's just like, that's the reality of it. It's a nightmare that you have to endure if you want children. Like, this is just the reality of it. So I created that within my child's mind, which took me through to adulthood as well. And then I looked out at the world and at people giving birth, and it's almost like thought did it and then says it didn't do it. And then it's like, wow, look how awful birth is. And we all have to, it's like, you don't even question that this is just what it is. You look out and that's what you see as real, which is just so weird in a way. It reminds me actually of, I think it's George Pransky. He says something along the lines of, it's like you draw a big lion on the wall. So you draw this big scary lion on the wall, and then you fall asleep and you wake up and you see this lion. You're like, oh my gosh, there's a lion. And it's so laughable, but that's exactly what we're doing. And I'm sure I've done it and I'm sure I'm doing it with lots of things currently in my life. It's just invisible to us, this thinking. And that is what is so subtle about the whole thing, that thinking is creating a whole reality of life all the time. And it's invisible to us. It's invisible to us. So we look out and we just see what we believe to be real. And anyone can try and convince us that what they see is real, but they're never going to succeed, because they're looking out through their thinking of what they see as real. You're looking out through your thinking, and it's never going to tie up. So anyway, so this is what I'd created for myself, unfortunately, which I think a lot of people do create for themselves with birth, it seems, unfortunately, definitely in the Western world. When I take my courses, I'll ask, like, what vague percentage, give me a percentage of how many negative versus positive you've heard. And it's always like way above 99% sometimes. Like that, yes, every one of my friends have awful experiences. Maybe once I heard of one nice experience. It just, unfortunately, and it's really just from what we see, I suppose, from the media, where they really try and dramatize, for drama, for entertainment. That's why they do it. This screaming women, and, from literally everywhere. I even say from the Bible is, I don't know if people know about it, but Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, when Eve ate the apple, it was like, right, the sin of Eve was that women will be cursed with a painful childbirth. So it's like it comes to us from all directions. And I'll just put in here, because it's interesting and relevant to what I'll be talking about, that I did see a different interpretation of this pain in childbirth from a religious perspective. That one of the teachers said that it was never meant to be painful, when it talks about that it will be a hard experience, but it will be an experience that is beyond your control. That's what it means by painful childbirth. which I thought that just makes so much more sense. But I'll come to that later about control that we think we have, and that actually is freedom to realize that we don't. So it's quite a yeah, really just going through my childhood and my teens, petrified, not too worried because I wasn't married and I wasn't going to be having kids anytime soon. But then I did get married. It was getting closer and closer. I did a master's in psychotherapy and counseling where I had to choose a thesis for the master's. So I chose the fear of childbirth, of course. And I thought, look, I just want to see what's going on here. Maybe there's something that I can see fresh, or although more or less, I definitely saw it as a reality. This is like, I remember reading the introduction to my thesis that I did right at the beginning. It's so drab and like, I remember quoting things like childbirth is a torturous affair that we have to endure and all this. So, and then after I'd given birth, interestingly, I looked back at this paragraph that I'd written. And it was almost like it was from a different person. I was like, my gosh, like, how are you seeing things so dark and drab? And I redid the introduction, and suddenly I've got quotes of all these positive and it's amazing. And it's just so interesting how your whole reality can shift, and you can find quotes that back up whatever you believe, like and research to back up whatever you believe. So it's just really, there's no truth out there. That's what it's pointing to, which is again freedom. And so during this thesis that I was doing, it was on tocophobia, which I found out that existed as a thing, which I was like, oh, brilliant, I've got a name for what I've got, which is the pathological fear of childbirth, to the extent that you're so scared that you postpone birth, or that you avoid having children altogether. That's like the definition of what it is. So I was interviewing women who had this, what they thought was tocophobia, and they hadn't gone into relationships. They didn't even have relationships because of it, because they were so scared that it might lead to childbirth. And really just listening to their stories of why they were so scared, and then just sort of what was behind all the fears. And in between as I was doing my thesis, I found myself pregnant, kind of like unexpectedly. It was always something that I wanted in the future, but I was too scared. I was just too scared, and I was just postponing. Found myself pregnant. And I'd say that was such a pivotal moment I didn't understand the principles at the time, and I didn't really understand what it was at the time, but now I look back, it was literally, I looked at remember it so clearly, I looked at the 2 lines of the pregnancy test and like saw I'm pregnant. And it was so unexpected. I mean, I was doing a pregnancy test like because my period was late, but it was like, well, there's no way I can be really. So it was a real shock. And in that moment of seeing the test, it was as if, and the way I see it now, it's as if the thinking that was so held in place, so strong, and like, so that I couldn't see anything other than this is what birth is. It was as though, maybe because of the shock, or I don't know what, it just dropped for like a split second. And what whooshed in that moment was just like, oh my goodness, just a feeling of such, gosh, it's even hard to explain. It was just such a knowing and a security and a safety and just a real comforting, nurturing whoosh of like, it's fine, it's absolutely fine. And I knew in that split second, you're not going to be having the cesarean that you've planned for your whole life. That was always how I thought I'd get through it. I can't give birth. And you're going to be fine. And you're going to give birth normally and naturally without fear. Like all of that just came through in like a whoosh. And then I was back to panic again. It was just like, wow. I always remembered that. Even like when I came across the principles years later, it was like, oh, right. Like I get it. It's like this rock solid thinking that we create our whole world out of, that it dropped, and I was able to see the truth for a split second. And it's kind of, that's all you really ever need. They talk about the snake that you see, you think it's a snake, and then you see it, so you get close up and you see it's a rope, and then you're not scared anymore. And when you come up away from it again, you can never really be scared again, because you know it's a rope. It was kind of that kind of analogy of like, you know, it can't really, it lost its grip that little bit. It can't really be as true as I think, because like, what was that? That was something like the realest thing I've ever felt. Despite all of this fear, all the time, anxiety, fear, there was something like so in the feeling of it that was so real in that really just sort of got me through, I suppose, without panicking too much. But I knew obviously I had the 9 months to overcome my fear. I dropped the thesis and I went and studied hypnobirthing, which is self-hypnosis for birth. And I suppose at the time and afterwards, this is another interesting thing, that I was taught all these tools and techniques for a calm and peaceful birth. And I very much took it on like my religion. I would just do like everything that it told me to. So affirmations, visualizations, like listen to these tracks this many times a day and you'll visualize the exact birth you want and that's what you'll get. And it was all very much, I don't know, almost like magic. I was like, well, how can this actually really work? This can't be true. Like you watch videos and the women look like they're sleeping, the baby just comes out. And I'm like, come on. So I was very skeptical of it. But at the same time, I was like, well, I just don't have much choice. I'm petrified. I'm just going to go and do this course. And so I did listen to these hypnosis tracks, which were meant to be like changing your thinking from I'm really scared to I'm really confident. So with these tracks saying you're confident, you're calm. And as I'm going through this preparation, I am feeling myself to be confident and calm. So I'm like falling into this misunderstanding. Oh, wow, look, the hypnosis is working. It's making me confident and calm. It's getting rid of all my fears. And of course, I'd go in and out of it. And then came the birth, and it was just unbelievable birth experience. Like the ecstatic, really, is my first birth. I would say was just like the most ecstatic moments of my life, that birth. And again, what did I put it down to? I was like, well, these tools and techniques have enabled me to keep calm and to create this peace and to give me this amazing birth, that because I visualized so much, look, I got it. So I straight away trained to be a hypnobirthing practitioner, because that was what I thought had given me this ecstatic birth experience. And I was teaching women for many years, and it didn't take too long for me to realize, hold on a minute, like how come these women are all doing the same thing? Some are having these idyllic, wonderful births, and some absolutely aren't. And so like, what is it? I felt like, what am I missing? There's a missing piece. What is it? And then, of course, coming across the principles, and that's why the book that I wrote on birth is called The Missing Piece, P-E-A-C-E, the missing piece of the jigsaw, and the missing piece, which is our peace inside of us. The missing piece in childbirth, what I now see it to be is, and it's so simple that we miss it, because it's just so obvious and simple. But rather than these tools and techniques, like creating the calm and creating the peace for me, what was really happening was the peace is already, and even the confidence and everything, it's like all of that is already within us. Like, how amazing is that? The full package, everything we ever want in our lives. That's why it really is the secret to everything. Everything we could ever want. Our self-esteem, our confidence, joy, peace of mind, which is what everyone wants, is after in the end. Just this joy, the most joy we could ever feel, like everything that we are seeking all the time, that's what we want in our lives, we have already. It's just so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous that we miss it. And then along come these tools and techniques that say, you know, this is going to create it for you. And what is really happening is the dust of my thinking was settling. So that brick wall of what I'd built, of what birth was, had kind of fallen away, if only for a moment, but it was enough to like make me aware like something's not as true as I thought. And just, in fact, there's a great quote that I put in the book. Yeah, it's by Deepak Chopra. He writes, meditation is not a way of making your mind quiet, which is what hypnobirthing really is, meditation. It is a way of entering into the quiet that is already there. And that's just the key point. Buried under the 50,000 thoughts the average person thinks every day. I've actually heard it 80,000. It's even worse. But it's just like all day, every day, our thoughts are going crazy. You know, I usually have a glitter jar on my desk because I think my kids have stolen it. But literally these snow globes. The snow globe is like going crazy without thinking all the time, shaking. And like all that has to be done, or not even has to be done, it happens by itself. It happens by itself. That, you know, when we're in this crazy world of thinking and stress and exams and whatever you're having to contend with in your life, whatever it is, the moment that all of that just settles, you've got your natural confidence, your natural everything just coming and shining through. And I suppose that's what I see now as what happened, that it was, and even more so, like doing that thesis, like it came up with some key things of the fears that women actually fear. And one of the, I've been thinking about it a lot recently, but one of the fears is the fear of death. And I've been wondering recently whether that fear of death is actually a fear of losing oneself, like losing the ego in a way. And I say that because of my own birth experience. The reason why it was so ecstatic, I think, was because I just disappeared. I disappeared. Deborah was no longer there. It was the death of Deborah. I mean, for that, that's why it was so good. And it's so ironic. I know Sydney Banks, the originator of this understanding, he talks about his enlightenment experience as a death as well. So it's kind of like the death of like, and it's no loss really. This thinking of who we think we are with our conditions, and this is what I like, and this is what I don't like. This is how it should be. And it has to go this way for me to be happy. All of these, and my personality, and I'm this type of person, all of these sort of that we like box ourselves into this little, you know, we cut off all the potential of what we could be by saying, this is what I am. It's like all of that just disappeared in my birth. I was just like, I was gone. I was just gone. There was no critical voice whatsoever, which was like amazing. This annoying voice that's always there, who has something to say about everything all the time, gone. And I suppose even like typical things that I wouldn't do. I mean, it sounds a bit strange, but like I walked from one room to another with no clothes on during the birth, which I would never do. Like as Deborah, I would never do that. No, it's almost like all the things of my personality, it's just like, it's just all out the window. And I was just in the flow of life, like really just in sync with just life. That's what I can really put it as. And it was amazing. It was like, it was no loss for Deborah to be gone. It was just, it's almost a shame that, you know, all that thinking had to rush back in afterwards. But it's like, you know, obviously that's life. That's what we are. It comes and goes. But I was able for that birth to have an experience without any of that. And what's amazing about birth and so comforting to pregnant ladies is I always have to mention brainwaves. Sorry if you've heard me speak before, because I always mention the brainwaves because it's so fascinating to me. But in birth, your brainwaves go to the slowest that they will ever go in a waking state. So like agitated thinking is beta, that if you look at the brainwaves of an agitated, stressed person, it's beta, like jagged, you can't think clearly. And then once you're a little bit relaxed, maybe you're in meditation, or you're just really relaxed, it's slower, it goes to alpha. So it's just like, and we, in this state, we gain more perspective, we like it's just, we see differently. We see the same thing, but differently. We just gain this, the bigger picture. We see the bigger picture. And then this during birth, what we're given is the brainwaves go to theta, which is like the slowest that your brainwaves will ever go in your life. You only get it during birth, which just says to me, like, wow, wow, wow. Like, how incredible is that? Like, that nature or God or whatever, in its brilliance, it's phasing us out. It's phasing us out in birth. We are being phased out. Why? Because our intellect and us are not needed whatsoever in the birth process. We are not needed. We actually just create havoc. As we see with all the births that we hear about, we create havoc. We bring fear, we bring anxiety. We just muddy the waters. Like, just get yourself out. The mind is not needed to give birth. And actually in the hypnobirthing book, I always remember this image of they say that even if a woman is in a coma, her body will still give birth. I always remembered that, so striking. Because what is it showing us? That your body will just birth. Your mind does not need to be there whatsoever to have an opinion on what's going on. You can have an opinion on what's going on, but it's really quite, you can have your running commentary. It's just going to cause suffering, really, in the end. It's no use. And, no pushing, no nothing. She just has the baby. So that to me really, like, is in a nutshell that can take all the fear out of birthing, I think, for just really to realize that. And also during the pregnancy, we're not doing anything. That the amount of stuff that is going on within our body is just mind-boggling. I mean, I know such a small amount, and even that boggles my mind. But like the amniotic fluid changes every 2 days, apparently, and all the ligaments are being softened, like hormones all around. Even all the pregnancy, like grievances, like hemorrhoids or heartburn, all the things that we complain about. There's brilliance behind all of it. There's reasons for it, because more blood is being pumped around for even preparing for later, for afterbirth, giving you stores of more blood. Like, it's just like, you can't even intellectually understand how brilliant it is. And so that's all happening throughout your pregnancy, even when it's coming closer to the birth, your body's getting ready to open up. Like all of this is just happening. And then I really just like to put across to women that when your body comes to give birth, that brilliance does not just leave you. It wouldn't make sense that it would just suddenly, right now you're on your own. Now you get on with it and you go and give birth on your own. And just really made me think about this other big fear of pregnant ladies, the fear of losing control. It makes sense. If you think that you're in control and that you have to do everything, yes, that is so scary. The idea of losing control, like, my gosh, it's all on me. I have to give birth. Like, that is such a big responsibility. I have to get the baby out of me. Like, how do I do such a thing? Like, how? That's scary if you think you're in control, and then it's scary to lose control. But this is where my teaching just has become simpler and simpler. Of what I'm trying to put across to women now is, you're not in control. You never have been. And guess what? There's something else that is. That's so much more effective than us. 1,000,000 billion times. I often think of waves, like these powerful, awesome perfection of the waves. Like, this just such power. And like, so you've got that going on. It's like the power of the universe. And then, like, if you can imagine, like, trying to make your own waves, I don't know, like, let's just try and create artificial waves with our hands, say. And we're like paddling around and like losing our breath and like, how can we do it? How can we do it? Or it's all on me to create the waves, otherwise there'll be no waves in the sea. Like a ludicrous example, but like, that's what it's like. Like, why would we do that when we've got this powerful natural force, which is just perfect, doing exactly what needs to be done, so much bigger than us. And yet we're trying to, like, gasping for air, just trying to, like, oh my gosh, it's all on me. I have to do it. So it's really just, that's what I'm trying to, and it's not just in birth, of course. You know, I see it in birth. So I think it's so easy to see in birth for anyone who has given birth. I think they would say afterwards that that wasn't me. I mean, that was the overwhelming feeling I got after I'd given birth. Like, that was nothing to do with me. And then people are like patting you on the back. Oh, wow, what a good birth. They're like, well done. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's so laughable and ludicrous that they'd be saying well done to me. Like, what are you, I didn't do anything. Obviously I didn't do that. Like, that was so big. That's nothing to do with me. And however people's birth go, I would think that's kind of the feeling that they have, like, whoa, this is so huge and beyond me. You know, I didn't do this. So I think that's why in birth it's kind of so clear that you're this chattering of the mind that rules our life, that we listen to most of the time. It's totally irrelevant in birth. Like, it's, if anything, it just gets in the way. And yeah, I suppose just to realize that that's the same for the whole of life, and that probably sounds quite strange. But just this constant commentary that is in our heads, and I love what I'm reading at the moment is Nicola Bird's book. It's called A Little Piece of Mind. It's just come out. I got a copy at the conference. And she talks about Bob being in our head. I don't know why Bob, but Bob is this drunkard that's in our head who has an opinion on everything, who we listen to, who we actually like ask opinions of, or should I do this? Should I do that? And he's just spouting out stuff. He's drunk. Like, he's never talking sense. Like, why are we paying him any attention? It's just such a laughable thing. But that's kind of like, we've all got this Bob in our head, and it sounds like us. It's got our voice. So it's even more compelling that you want to listen to it. But it's just actually, it's nothing. It could be anything and nothing. What this Bob is saying, like, you listen to a drunk person, like, what they sprout out is really just like nothing. I've also heard people talk about it as if, imagine as if your thoughts were speaking a different language that you didn't understand. All of a sudden, you're just like not affected by it anymore. It's like brilliant. But somehow, over time, we've got to pay so much attention to this. It's like our thinking is gold. It's like, and we follow it, and we think it's serving us, this sort of this mental chatter that drives us mad. And when we realize, I suppose, like, how irrelevant it is, like, your body will give birth, whether that's there or not. Your life would be lived, your life will be lived, whether that's there or not. And more effectively, if you just don't listen to that just sort of nonsense, just leave it in the background. It's never saying anything that useful. And just like let life unfold as it will. Like, it's interesting because I've just recently been listening to these interviews, and it's about how people got into the work that they got into. And they all start off the interview by saying, I never meant to do this. It was never planned. And then this happened and this happened. And I somehow fell into it. And it's a very interesting thing to get across to students, because when you're at university, you're 18 years old and you're thinking, I've got to know what I want to do with my life. And like, of course not. Of course not. Like, you're going to choose what you do. It's going to make sense in the moment. I studied finance. What's that got to do with birth? Nothing. But in the end, your life is just going to take you in all directions, and you're just going to be doing what you're doing. And I suppose what makes life so simple with this understanding is, I think you start to see that you just do find yourself more in the present moment, so that you're just like doing the next obvious step right in front of you. Like, what's obvious now to do? What's obvious now to do? You don't even think about it. And that's what I think just simplifies life so much. You almost like, I mean, of course you go forward in your head and start whatever, what if, but it's almost like you catch onto it pretty quick. When you've been in this understanding a bit, you're like, oh gosh, look, I'm doing that again. And it just becomes very much a very simple life of, gosh, what's the obvious next step? And that's all you ever have to, all you've got is now. That's all you ever have to know, really. We don't even have to know, it just happens. And that's very much in birth as well. That when you're in this when you're not caught up in your thinking in birth, which you also will get caught up in your thinking, which is also absolutely human and fine. But when you'll find that when you're like in the flow or in the, they call it labor land or in the zone, or it's another word for it in birth, but you'll find that you just know what to do. You just know what to do. So you'll find you don't even question it. You'll find yourself standing. You'll find yourself pacing stairs. You'll find yourself lunging down. It's just that there's no thought behind it. There's no thought behind it. It's just, you're just doing what, it's just so obvious. If someone would say to you, like, why are you doing that? It's just like, I don't know. I don't know why I'm doing it. It's just what's making sense to do. So very much the same in birth, you know, as in life. And just even if, just find it amazing, even if, when you look at babies, when they're first born, and not many people know because they don't do it because they don't know that it's even a possibility. But I've seen it on YouTube. If you put a baby on its mother's stomach straight after birth, it will actually crawl up and go to the breast and drink, which is just like a newborn. It's just unbelievable. And the breast of the mother, the nipple has gone dark just at that time, like towards the end of pregnancy. You'll find that it's gone darker. And women often say, like, what's so weird? Why is it? And the reason why it's gone dark is so that the baby can see where to drink. So it's just literally, life is just being lived for us. You know, the color of the skin changing so that a baby knows where to drink. Like, is there any thought anywhere in that? Baby isn't thinking, I want to drink even. It's just life sort of occurring. And then like the colostrum, which is the baby's first, the mother's first milk, it's the perfect nutritional content for what the baby needs. It's got a laxative effect that helps the baby to do its first stool, that will then get rid of red blood cells that it needs to get rid of. Just like, again, the brilliance of it is just, it almost like gives you this confidence of, okay, everything is so taken care of. It's actually so beyond me, all of the details of this. I'm so not needed. Like, just sort of, I don't know, that there's just realizing that this running commentary is no use to us. And I say that knowing that that running commentary is going to come all as well. And that it's not the aim to get rid of it either, although it sounds like that's what I'm saying. That birth is like life, a real roller coaster of emotions. Like at the end of the day, you're going to be thinking, you're going to be feeling whatever you are thinking in the moment, and that's just how it's going to be. So if you're going to get fearful thinking, you're just suddenly going to feel scared, and that's, you know, and a lot of, so what I didn't quite agree with the hypnobirthing afterwards when I came across the principles was the resistance to these bad feelings. So it's like you'd get fear, all of the negative emotions, fear, anxiety, overwhelm, pain. It's like all of that, we don't want that. We don't want that in our experience. Like the peace and the joy and the calm, yeah, we'll welcome that in. That's lovely. But all of this, just like resist that with all your might. We don't want that. So it's very much, if fear comes, like quick, do a fear release exercise, or quickly replace the image, replace your thinking. And that can be very stressful to be busy managing your thinking. And you don't need to do it. Like, that's the wonderful thing. And again, this snow globe is just like, so the snow globe is a bit cloudy. Fear, you've got fear at the moment. And, you know, are we going to continue shaking it up? Which is really what hypnobirthing is doing, I think, because it's like, first of all, it's panic. Oh my gosh, there's an emotion I don't want. Chuk, chuk, chuk. How do we get rid of it? And then putting on all these exercises of what we have to do. Like, we're filling our mind just with more and more stuff that we need to do. Whereas what do we do with the snow globe when we want the snow to settle? Is you just put it down. You just leave it alone. Just put it down, you know. And but we don't know. We don't know that's the possibility. And I think I mentioned last time we spoke that even in my fourth birth, I found myself scared again. And you'd think with all of this, whatever, the hypnobirthing and the principles, it's like almost like you think, well, you won't have fear as part of your experience anymore. And it's not at all so, because, you know, how can I stop a fearful thought coming? It's again, it comes back to this control. Like, I have no control over what I'm going to think. the next moment. I have no control I have no control over anything. We don't have control over circumstances. We don't have control over our thinking, and it's fine. And whatever comes. And I was scared, and everything was and almost like just the relationship to the fear is so different now. It's like the fear came in, and I was scared, and I just started thinking to myself, wow, this is really interesting that I'm doing this. Isn't it interesting that my mind is going to fear when everything right now is absolutely fine? Because it was fine. And I just started running forward of, oh, what if the second part hurts? Just started thinking, what if it hurts in the second stage? And there was no reason for me to be doing that. But again, there's no control, and that's what it was doing. But it was kind of like I was able to create a distance from it of like, oh, isn't it interesting that my mind is doing this, and how annoying that it's doing this, because like now I'm scared. But then kind of just sort of leaving it alone. It couldn't really catch me. It couldn't really get me as it would have in the past, where I may have got really panicked about being scared. So it's this, it's almost like your relationship to the thinking just changes. It just softens. It's just whatever comes in, it's kind of like, we don't realize it, but that resistance and pushing away of all that negative thinking is what's creating all the suffering in the first place. Just crazy to think that if we just allowed it in, it would just come in and it would be on its way out probably before we know it, or not. It's not even as a strategy, but it's just, yeah. I mean, I find a lot of what gets to people in birth is, this shouldn't be happening. That's, in general, this shouldn't be happening, or this should be different. And that's what takes up a lot of our, headspace. But again, like you're gonna go through what you're gonna go through. What thinking is gonna come to you, and it's like a roller coaster, and a roller coaster that that you've a safe one. You can't really fall. There's nowhere to fall. That you've got this ultimate safety net of guidance, even guidance. Your body's just doing what it has to do, and you're going to be doing what's obvious to do in front of you. So it's like you're supported. Your mind and your body are supported, like you're not on your own. And that's why we realize this control aspect. There's nothing to fear of losing control. In fact, losing control is like amazing, the best thing you can do. Just let the intelligence of the entire universe do it. Like, why are you doing it? But it's funny, it's interesting. Like even from childhood to adulthood, we do the same thing. Like when a child learns to walk, it's not thinking, oh, now I'm going to put my first foot in front of the other. Now I'm going to walk. Now I'm going to put my hand up. Now it's not thinking anything. It's just life is living it. Life is living this child. And then at some point in time, we start thinking, oh, this is down to me. Or even like we encourage it because we're like, well done, you're walking. You managed to walk, well done. Like, so then they start building this thing of, all right, like I've achieved this and I'm an I. And, it's obviously the way that life is that we start taking almost too much on ourselves. Like, okay, that's all there is. There's only me here to be, that has to achieve, that has to maneuver and manage everything. And if I don't do it, nothing's going to happen. And I think that's the amazing thing with this understanding, that we really start to see that the more you take your hands off your life, it just flows in the most wonderful of directions. First of all, you're just so open to everything. You realize that everything is ultimately just a creation of your own making, of all the different thoughts and beliefs that you've taken on. And if you can just really open up to the beauty of life right in front of you, it's just so much more enjoyable, first of all. And you just watch life unfold. Oh, there's another great quote. I wonder if I can find. It's by Janet Velasquez. She's head of the active birth movement in London. She's quite famous in the birth world. But she writes, I find it incredibly comforting to know that we are held and guided in life's journey by forces greater than ourselves. It's not all up to us. We can let go and let both life and birth unfold in all their majesty. So that is really, and it's interesting that she's a birth expert, because again, in birth, you just see it so clearly. It's just like, it's so blindingly obvious, you know, that we're not in control, that there's something else in control, that we don't have to worry or fear, that we've got this incredible, I call it in the book, that the ultimate safety net of just, you're so held and supported. You've got all the resilience you need inside of you. There's nothing in the end to fear. There's nothing to fear. You've just got, you know, they say like, you're good, nothing to fear but fear itself. That's it. So fear will come in and that will feel unpleasant for a bit. And then like, there's nothing really, it's a strange thing. It's a strange thing, but in the end, you can just sort of, it gives you this sense of real peace inside. You just know that there's, I don't know, that life is not what you thought it was. And even when I think back to fearing birth, it's like, I wasn't actually fearing birth. What I thought it was my thinking about birth that was freaking me out. My thinking that I held about birth was just like, and I remember the feeling of it. It was such a horrible feeling of this, but you're not scared of what you think you're scared of. I was never scared of the birth, because the birth itself, I mean, was amazing. I didn't even know what it was. I mean, I didn't even know the first. So it's just like I'd conjured up this thing in my head of what it was. And then I was freaking myself out with my own thinking. And again, it's like, you just, reminds me of my friend who was scared of, he was always scared of the aeroplane falling out the sky. That was his number one fear. The aeroplane was just going to fall out the sky. He used to replay it in his mind, and especially when he went on trips. And then one day he was on a plane and it got stuck in an air pocket, and it feels like it's falling out the sky. So it's like, this is his worst fear coming true. He'd replayed so much in his mind, was so scared of it. And he was just so calm. He was just like, it's fine. So it's almost like all of this fear, it's not even fearing the actual event in the end. It's just, it's your thinking about what it is. So that's just interesting to, you know, when people say, well, just the thought of it makes me nervous. Just the thought of it makes me nervous. So imagine like actually having to do it. If just the thought of it makes me nervous, it's actually only the thought of it makes you nervous. If it wasn't for the thought, you wouldn't be nervous. Like, it's just so funny. So
that's really the feeling when you explain that is also lovely. I have got a couple of questions, and I just want to say to people who are listening, if you have any questions, you can type them into the chat box, or you can put your hand up and you can actually come on and speak to Deborah if you'd like to. But while we're waiting to see if anybody else has questions, that there's a couple of things, Deborah. One is that the thing about being frightened, when you get fear, say you're in childbirth and the fear comes up, what I used to believe was that fear meant something, right? And when you think that it means something, then you start adding more thought onto it, right? You add more thought, and then you get even more scared. Yeah. And what you're saying is that it doesn't mean anything at all. And that was one of the biggest things that I got from this understanding, was that those feelings don't mean what you think they mean.
Yes.
It just means I'm having, you know, there's some fear, there's some thought, fear yes. thought going through my mind. And it doesn't mean I have to take notice of it. It's just Bob.
Yeah.
Bob, not. So that was not so much a question, but what I'm imagining is that someone who's already had a difficult birth, right? So they've been through a really bad experience, because what you've described is you were really frightened of it, and then you had a birth and it was fine, right?
Yeah.
But if somebody's already had an unpleasant experience of some sort, you know, had a really difficult birth, how do they then look at, I mean, I know you've actually said that in one way or another, but just maybe you could just speak to someone who has been through something really difficult.
Yes, it's really interesting that, because I have seen clients who really are so set on the birth that they had. They've got their story of the birth that they had, and they have strong memory of it. And almost in learning the principles, they start to see what happened differently. So it's just like you're never stuck with the experience that you think you had. It's like they suddenly gain perspective. They're like, oh, so maybe they start to see new things, even if it was like years after. They're like, oh, right, maybe the doctor wasn't really forcing me. I think maybe he just really thought that was the right thing to do. Like I had a client like that, like she was so upset because she really felt she was forced into a certain intervention. And then like all of a sudden, a few weeks in, she's suddenly like, you know what? I just realized he really thought that was best for me. Like he was doing it for my own interests. And it's just like, it's just so amazing, isn't it? With this understanding, you're never stuck with anything. You think, oh gosh, there's this horrible thing in my past that happened. It's always going to stay horrible. And it's just not so. You gain new perspective on what actually happened. Wiser thoughts just start emerging for you around it. So there's that. And then I suppose just going into a new birth fresh, just as much as possible. And maybe the memories of the last birth are going to come flooding back, but almost to see them for what they are. Okay, like I'm getting this horrible feeling and it feels just like the last birth. Well, it feels like the last birth because memories of the last birth are right in front of you now. And so that's what you're experiencing. And it's as simple as that. But like, there's fresh, new thinking always. There's fresh, new thinking. There's fresh, new experience always. And I suppose just to be aware of that, and realizing that it's only just these thoughts that are being brought back that are giving you that same feeling. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, no, that's lovely. That's lovely. So it seems like nobody's asking questions, so they must be very happy with what we've been saying, which is really good. So that's lovely. And
Yes.
I can't think of anything else to say on that, Deborah. I don't know if you've got anything else that you want to add.
Oh gosh, wow. I mean, I just think Jack Pransky's quote. I know I'm really into quotes, as you can probably tell. It sums up the whole of the principles to me, is that, and I hope I get it right. All we are is peace, love, and wisdom, and the power to create the illusion that we're not. And that to me is like, don't even bother going any further with delving into the principles. That's all you need to know. Like that really is the truth of it. And it sounds so, yeah, we're peace and we're love, but like really when you fall into that and you see it, it's not even, we see it in our everyday life, so it's not even, wisdom can sometimes sound all grand and wisdom, and all I'm talking about is just the simplicity of common sense that we know what to do in general life until we get clouded and we don't know what to do anymore, and then we're shown it again, and it's just this, that's what's there for us. That's what we are. We just, even if we do get caught up in birth or in life, it's just realizing, oh, I'm caught in an illusion. I'm caught in this thought storm at the moment. Oh, well, and fall kind of just to, interesting, the words of like fall asleep and fall in love and fall. It's like a falling out of the thinking, falling out of the concepts that we're stuck in that moment, and just like falling into the truth, like what's really there. Of just like, I often just, if I'm getting caught up, I'll just physically sort of go backwards like this and just be like, just remember, like, it's just so comforting. Like I just get this whole whoosh of comfort. It's like, just remember what's really true. Just remember what's really there for you. You're just caught up and constricted at the moment. And this feeling of constriction is what is telling you that you're constricted and you're not seeing clearly what's true at the moment. And just a falling out of that you'll find yourself like in a new place, in a new reality, with access to all these lovely feelings that we are already. And not to push away the bad, I would say, like not to be scared of, this isn't about being peaceful all the time, like not at all. Like when I call it the missing piece in childbirth, I'm talking about being at peace with whatever you're feeling. That is the absolute true freedom. I mean, because if we're just trying to be peaceful, that is actually very not peaceful. Because you're just like, no, I don't want that. I don't want that. Yes, but I welcome in the peace. No, but I don't want fear. I don't want. That's so not peaceful, you know, to be at peace with it all. Fear comes in like, oh, well, how annoying. Oh, well, looks like I'm going to go on a journey of a bit of fear now. Looks like I'm going to go on a journey of a bit of depression now. Oh, well, this is what it is. It's only thinking. I'm going to come back to myself, you know, even after you've had the baby, all the overwhelm, all the stress, the baby blues that might come, all of this. It's like, yes, it's going to come, and just like, okay, let it be there. Let it be there. Let Bob be there in the background being drunk. Okay, he's there. Right. Okay. Just pull up a chair and stay for however long you're going to stay. And then, like, you know, I'm not too worried about you, because it's because that's not really who I am. I suppose that's the ultimate. That is not me, you know, that's not who I am. I don't have to be scared of it. I think it's like you said, that we get this feeling of fear, and we think, gosh, that means something is wrong. And it's the exact opposite. Like, it means nothing. It means that you're clouded. It means that you're stuck in some thinking. It's like, how amazing that we get this fear to show us where our head is. Otherwise we wouldn't know, you know, just like a cut on our hand. If we didn't have it, you know, if we didn't have pain, we wouldn't take our hand out of the fire. So it's just the same amazing wisdom. And the whole thing is wisdom, you know, everything that comes to us there's just wisdom in the system. So any negative feeling is just alerting us, oh, you know, I've left who I really am, and I've forgotten that everything I want is already there, and just a falling out of what you're in, but not on our time frame, of course. It's just like going with it and flowing with it, and not being too interested, which is a natural thing, not being too interested in all of this anymore. It's just like you start to realize, it's like, okay, it's just drunk Bob. It's like, how much can we really pay attention to this and keep believing it? But it's, yeah, there's nothing really much to say. Just if you are pregnant, I'm jealous that you're going to get to give birth. Like, what amazing experience. Like, really, the awe and magic of birth, of like, just this human being coming out of you, and the baby, and there's like, even just the thought of that again, thinking is just, you know, that is life. That is life. That is life in front of you, pure, awesome life. So just enjoy it, enjoy the whole roller coaster of it. And yeah.
So that's one. So if anyone is interested in knowing more about Deborah and what she does and her book and all of that stuff, there's going to be a link underneath this video on YouTube to show you, to link you back to Deborah and all of the things about her, how you can get in touch with her, how you can work with her if you wanted to, and the book and so on. And also I would really recommend listening to watching this video again and just listening to it and being in the feeling, because the feeling, I've just had such a wonderful feeling listening to you, Deborah. It's been gorgeous, really gorgeous.
Thank you.
So
thank you so much.
And if you're interested in any more, this is part of a whole series of The Secret of Everything videos. So you can, you know, if you want to watch more, there are more on this channel too. So that's more stuff. So thank you so much, Deborah, for being here.
Okay.
And I'm sure I shall see you again soon.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks everyone else for being here too. Bye then.
Bye.